This is M. Gunakar, Assistant Professor of Zoology, Government Degree College, Siddipet, Telangana State. Today, we will discuss parasitic adaptations in helminths. So, before going into the details of parasitic adaptations in helminths, let us have a look at some definitions. What is parasitism? Parasitism can be defined in many ways, but actually it is a non-mutual relationship between two different species where one species, which is called the parasite, benefits at the expense of the other species, which is called the host. So it can be defined in another way. Parasitism is an association of two organisms of different species in which one is benefited and the other is harmed. The organism which is benefited is called the parasite, and that which suffers is called the host. So remember, it is a non-mutual relationship. Only one is benefited, the other is harmed. Next, what is adaptation? Adaptation, please mind the spelling ADA, not O. ADAPTATION. It is the fitness of an organism to its environment, or it is an adjustment of an organism to its environment. And after adapting to its environment, what is the result? It results in suitable and convenient morphological and physiological correlation between an organism and its environment. So the organism becomes suitable to live in an environment where it lives, whether it is an external environment or within the host body. So whatever the medium it is, it will be suitable, it will become suitable after the adaptation only, but not before the adaptation. So the parasitism has to adapt to its environment, whether it is external environment or internal body of the host. We will look into some helminth parasites. So helminths means there are two phylums included in the helminths. One is platyhelminths and the other is nematodes. That means nematohelminthes or aschelminthes. So if we look at some of the platyhelminth parasites, there are many, a big list is there, but let us have a look at some of the examples. Number one is Taenia solium. So generally Taenia lives in the small intestine. Taenia lives in the small intestine of the man. Then Fasciola hepatica. Fasciola hepatica, it lives in the liver of sheep. That's why it is also called sheep liver fluke. Then Fasciolopsis busci, which lives in the intestine. Then Paragonimus westermanni, it lives in lungs. Schistosoma hematobium, it is a blood fluke of man. Then Echinococcus granulosus, Opistharchis sinensis, Diplozoon indicum. This diplozoon is an external parasite which lives in the gills, which lives on the gills of the fishes, freshwater fishes. Then Diphyllobothrium latus, then Gyrodactylus. These are some of the helminth or platyhelminth parasites living on not only human being, in different animals also. Now coming to the nematode parasites, main nematode parasites include Ascaris lumbricoides, and all these nematodes are roundworms. Ankylostoma duodenale. Then Enterobius vermicularis. Enterobius vermicularis is also called pinworm, which lives in the large intestine, cecum and appendix of man. Whereas Ascaris lumbricoides is present in small intestine. Then Ankylostoma duodenale is the hookworm, which lives also in intestine. Dracunculus medinensis, which lives in subcutaneous tissue. The Dracunculus medinensis lives in the subcutaneous tissue of man, which is commonly called guinea worm. Wuchereria bancrofti, which is a filarial worm, which lives in the lymph vessels and lymphatic ducts of man. Then Lova lova, which is commonly called the eye worm, which lives in subcutaneous tissue of eyes. Then Trichuris trichura, which is commonly called the whipworm, which lives in the cecum and appendix of man. Then Trichinella spiralis, which is also a human nematode parasite. Its larval stage lives in the striated muscles, whereas adults lives in intestine. So these Parascaris echorium, which lives in the, it is not a human nematode parasite, which lives in horse. And Dictyocolus filaria, it is also not a human pathogen, which lives in other animals, like for example lungs of the sheep. So let us have what is the modes of infection of these helminth parasites. There are different types of infection, that is entering the the parasites enter into the human beings or in other animals by various ways. For example, first way is swallowing. So most of the parasitic helminths enter through the mouth as encysted larvae. So access to the mouth is affected with larvae, affected with the leaves. Access with the mouth is affected with food, especially the leaves, vegetables and fruits, or with improperly cooked flesh of intermediate host. So generally Taenia solium, like this, they enter through the flesh. When we eat improperly cooked or uncooked flesh, then the larval stages may enter into our body, or the eggs or their stages may enter into our body and then become parasitic. Then some of the helminth parasites, they bore through the skin also. They pierce the skin and then enter. So for example, Cercaria of blood flukes, then like schistosoma, they penetrate the human body through the skin from water of rivers or canals or tanks, etc. Then some of the helminth parasites, they enter directly. That is direct contact. Larvae of the gill inhabiting external parasite. For example, in the case of Diplozoon. So here you can see the Diplozoon indicum, which fix onto the gills on hatching from the capsules. Then they are attached to the gills by coiled filaments. And if you see the another polystomum, it is not given here. Larva of polystomum clings to the internal gills of tadpole and metamorphoses into a young fluke that migrates to the urinary bladder during the changes of the tadpole into a frog or toad. So like this, many ways of entry or infection of the platyhelminth parasites into the human beings and other animals will occur. And whereas in nematode parasites, they also enter into the human beings and other animals by these ways, but they also transmit through the vectors also. For example, if you see Wuchereria bancrofti, it will be transmitted from one person to the other person by the bite of the mosquito. So that's why mosquito happens to be a vector in this case. Culex mosquito, female Culex mosquito bite may transmit this Wuchereria bancrofti larval stages into the human beings from one person to the other person. So like this, many ways of helminth parasites of infection are there. So some of these we have discussed now. Now coming to the how this parasitism has arised in the living things. So actually this parasitism dates back to the ancient geological time, and it was considered, or it was believed that it arose soon after the differentiation of life that began in the world. And parasitism actually is a secondary mode of life which came into being after the free living way of life. So generally animals they tried their free living way, then later on during some circumstances the parasitism might have arisen. then it has probably grown out of harmless association of various types of organisms. So the get together of different individuals occasionally taking shelter temporarily on the body of some larger form. Some of the small animals might have taken shelter temporarily on the body of some larger forms. Then when the temporary shelter was repeatedly used, then the association of the two organisms become more intimate, and the smaller organism, they got not only shelter but also the free transport. When the large animal visits different places, the small animal which is present on the body also get the free transport from one place to the other, and then a bit of nourishment from the host also might have taken, of course. Then but at this instance they are not doing any harm, they were not doing any harm to the host body. But later the weak organism has might have started living within the body, entered within the body of the host without doing any harm to the host. Then finally they started feeding on the body tissues of the host. They learned to feed on the tissues of the host, so that the host body suffers some harm. So this association, when small animal, a weak animal starts feeding on the tissues of the host body to make a loss, earlier it might have not taken any host tissue, but it has learned over the time to feed the tissues of the host, so causing some harm, and now this association has been called the parasitism. So once the parasitism or parasite originated, and then they started their evolution in their own way, and to meet their additional demands also. So this might be the origin of parasitism. Generally the people or the scientists, they consider, they believe. Then these parasites, we know that there are two types of parasites, generally based on their where they live. So if they live on the body of the host body, external parts of the host body, then they are called as ectoparasites, and the phenomenon is called ectoparasitism. If they live inside the body of the host, then it is called as endoparasites, and the phenomenon is endoparasitism. Now coming to the what are the factors or what are the reasons necessary for origin of parasitism? Actually, at what circumstances this parasitism might have originated? Let us have a look at. So first of all, the first demand or first factor that might have contributed to the origin of parasitism, maybe there must be contact between prospective parasite and prospective host. If there is no contact, there would have no parasite at all. That's why the contact between the prospective parasite and prospective host is the first and foremost thing or necessary factor that contributed to the origin of parasitism. Next, the prospective parasites might have faced some environmental hazards like pH, viscosity, pressure, enzyme activities, oxygen tension, etc. All these hazards or environmental hazards might have forced the small animals or weak animals to get the shelter or to get the transportation by depending on the large animal. So this might have moved into the origin of parasitism. Then parasites have to develop some new structures like hooks and suckers to accommodate in the new environment that is inside the body of the host, and in this course they degenerate certain structures like the alimentary canal and the locomotory organs, because they are not useful once they enter into the body and take the shelter, and as well as they feed on the tissues and food material that is already digested in the host body. So that's why these might have not useful. So some of the organs might have degenerated, and some of the organs to accommodate in the new environment they might have developed. Then parasites that are very harmful initially. So what the changes over the time, the changes occurs in the parasites also. What is the changes? What are the changes? Let us have parasites that are very harmful initially have become more benign. That means earlier, during the earlier periods, parasites might have caused much harm to the host, so the host died, and along with the host, parasite also died. So over the time, the parasites have become more clever, and they become more benign to their host over time. That is not causing much harm. If they cause much harm and host dies, then they too die. So that's why to continue their life or to sustain their life, they have to see that the host animals also will not die. So that's why they have changed over the time. They became more benign to their host over time, and the parasites are less virulent at low at especially the parasites are less virulent at low host population. If the host population is very less, then the parasites will become very less virulent, because population density is very less, host density is very less. So that's why it will become a risk if the host population dies. So parasites are at risk because if they destroy their host, then they destroy themselves also. So this was given by Nees and Williams in 1994 and Zimmer in 2000. According to them, the parasites are less virulent at low host population, and they have become more benign to to their host over time. Now, let us come to the our topic, parasitic adaptations in helminths. Here, helminths means both the platyhelminths as well as nematodes. Now, a large number of helminths are parasitic. Just we have seen helminths means nematodes and platyhelminths. Just now we have seen many animals, the list of many species of parasitic helminthic parasites also. Then they show variation in habitat. They show especially, so I have listed out, or I have told you variation in their habitat, mode of infection, but possess similar adaptations to the parasitic life. So though they are different, they show differences in habitat and mode of infection, but all parasites they develop some similar adaptations to this new mode of life or parasitic mode of life. So the especially the survival of the parasite in the host body depends upon its ability to adapt in their particular environment. If it is not adaptable to the new environment, then the host body can kill the parasite easily, because the parasite is not accommodated properly in the new tissues, and the host body becomes more immune. So immunity of the host may kill the parasite. So that's why parasites, as and when they enter, as soon as they enter into the new environment of the host, then they have to accommodate themselves in the new environment or adapt to the new environment very fastly. So the faster the parasite adapts to its new environment, the more the parasite can live in the new environment of the host, and then it can sustain. So the parasitic adaptations are mainly categorized into two types. Number one is morphological adaptations, and number two physiological adaptations. So what are the morphological adaptations? Generally, morphological adaptations are subcategorized into three types. One is loss of certain organs. Earlier slide I have mentioned that the parasite, in adapting to new environment, it has to lose some of the organs. Then modification of certain existing organs. So certain existing organs have to change to the new environment. That's why there's modification of certain organs and development of certain organs. When some of the organs it is losing, so it has to develop some of the organs to new environment. So these are the three types of morphological adaptations. And again, another type of modifications are physiological adaptations. So both morphological and physiological adaptations made the larval stages, made the parasites to accommodate or to adapt to the new environment of the host body, inside or outside, very quickly, and then to sustain their life, to sustain their parasitic life. Now coming to the, first of all, morphological adaptations. What are the morphological adaptations of parasites? I already mentioned that there are three types of morphological adaptations. First one is loss of certain organs. Now, first and foremost, loss of certain organs is here loss of locomotory organs. Locomotion, that means locomotion especially is basically an effort for procuring food. So as the food is readily available in the host body, the necessity of locomotory organs have become minimum. That means minimal. So that's why parasites, it doesn't need to move from one place to the other place in the host body when it reaches its final tissues or final medium of the host body. That's why it loses all locomotory organs unnecessarily. They are because they are not needed. That's why they become unnecessary. That's why the locomotory organs gradually they lose. So parasites doesn't need any locomotion, so that's why they lose the locomotory organs. Number two, loss of sense organs. See, nervous system is poorly developed as it is not needed. So the sense organs also, the flatworms, particularly the internal ones, live in uniform environment with practically no changes to be perceived. So when the environmental changes are not there, so that's why the sense organs might have disappeared. Along with the sense organs, nervous system is also poorly developed. Now coming to the next one is the loss of digestive system. Loss of digestive system, as the parasites live on digested and semi-digested food. So because within the organs of the host body, the parasites, for example, let us take intestinal forms, say tapeworms. Generally tapeworms are surrounded by a digested food which is ready for absorption and assimilation. So therefore they have lost the alimentary canal, and they took saprozoic nutrition. So their long flat body also provided them a large surface to facilitate this new mode of nutrition, that is saprozoic. Now loss of respiratory organs. See, as most of the parasites live in the low oxygen environment in the host body, so that's why they might have depend upon the respiration without oxygen, that is they respire anaerobically. So that's why all these are changes, especially the certain loss of certain organs have taken place in adapting to the parasitic mode of life. Now coming to the second type of morphological adaptations of parasites, that is modification of certain organs. So just now we have seen loss of certain organs. Now coming to the modification of certain organs. Especially there are mainly, of course, in addition to these four types, there might be many other things also, but let us have a look at some important ones. So the first of all, increase of body size. So this increase of body size help the parasites in the increased egg production. So example, Taenia solium, Ascaris lumbricoides. What happens here is, let us have a look at the figure now here. So this is the body of Taenia solium, which is very longer. So actually it is very long. So you can see this much of very longer. So the total body is divided into divided into small segments which are unequal segments. So these segments are of three types. So they are also called proglottids: immature, mature, and gravid proglottids. So immature proglottids will be present near the anterior region and mature in the center, and gravid proglottids at the last. So in the gravid proglottids, what happens is the eggs are produced. So eggs are produced, and this for this purpose the body size has increased. So the number of eggs are increased in increased proglottids. When the body is increased in size, the more number of eggs are production, and this might have helped in the sustenance of their life, parasitic mode of life. So Taenia solium and Ascaris lumbricoides, we can see the increase of body size. Then coming to the flattened body. So here the body has become leaf-like. For example, fasciola hepatica, or ribbon-like Taenia, to fit easily in their environment. Now here you can see the fasciola hepatica here in this figure. So here you can see the fasciola hepatica leaf-like. The very flat leaf-like. leaf-like structure. So this is to help them to live in the liver cells or hepatic cells of the sheep. So that's why it is also called sheep liver fluke. So it can pass through the tissues, interstitial tissues, interstitial fluid and tissues very easily when its body is become very thin or leaf-like. Now coming to the Taenia solium, which is whose body is ribbon-like. That means flat. That's why it is also called intestinal flatworm. So it fits easily in their habitat, because I told you it lives in the intestine. So within the intestine it lives, and the flat or ribbon-like body also helpful in drawing the food material or absorbing the food material, digested food material from the host intestinal body, host intestinal lumen very easily. Then coming to the thick cuticle here. So some of the animals to protect from host digestive enzymes. So the cuticle helps in the thick cuticle helps the parasite to withstand the action of the digestive enzymes. They develop thick cuticle. Now eggshell has also become thick. So this is to protect from unfavorable conditions, because the eggs has to pass from one host to the other if they are digenetic or polygenetic parasites. So if they are monogenetic parasites, then not much problem. But if it is digenetic parasites, the eggs has to be protect themselves from the very much unfavorable conditions of the environment when they pass from one host to the other host. Now coming to the third type of morphological adaptations of parasites, it is development of certain organs. Not only loss of certain organs and modifications of certain organs, but they have developed new organs. They have developed new organs to suit the or to live suitably in the new environments of the host body. So in this topic we shall discuss organs of, especially the main thing is organs of attachment. So organs of attachment is very main thing they have developed. So what are these organs of attachment? So like hooks and suckers. Hooks and suckers have developed with the help of which they attach to the wall of the host body, and so that they do not get dislodged. And these attachment organs, they have helped them to attach very firmly to the organs to prevent them from being pushed out, and they cling or they anchor to the host organs very firmly with the help of the hooks and suckers. Now in the before slide we have seen. So for example, let me show you. So here in this case, now you can see these hooks and suckers very easily. In the case of Taenia solium, these are the these suckers. So these are the suckers. These are 4 suckers they have developed, and these are the hooks. So this is the rostrum. Central one is rostrum. This is when the view is from upside or upside. Now if we see from the lateral side, you can see here. You can see this from the lateral side. The suckers are present like this, and hooks are present on the above. So the hooks will be sharp structures. They will cling or attach or anchor to the body of the host tissues, especially for example within the intestine. Within the intestine, the food, when the food along with the water passes very forcefully, so that to attach them, the parasites have to forcefully, or to withstand the forcible flow of the food material in water, they have to cling to the host tissues very firmly. That's why they developed this type of suckers and hooks and rostrum, so that they cling to the body wall very firmly. Now coming to the, that is organs of attachment. Next is tegument. What is tegument? Actually, this tegument is nothing but it's a part of integument. Integument is body wall. So the tegument is especially to protect the parasite from the digestive juices of the host. In the earlier slide we have discussed that the host tissues or host system may try to evade or may try to kill the host, kill the parasite in any way. So that's why it makes or it releases some digestive enzymes and juices and other juices to kill the parasite. So to withstand the digestive action of digestive juices and digestive enzymes of the host body, the parasite also developed many organs. So in this way it has developed the tegument. So tegument is a hard structure, you can see in the figure also. Now I will show you. So the tegument, see this structure, total structure has become tegument. So the body wall, it is a part of a body wall. So the tegument is very tough and it will not allow the internal soft tissue of the parasite to be damaged. So that's why though the tough tegument is present, the microvilli which are present, like microvilli which are attached to the tegument external point, here they help in absorption of food substances. So there is no dearth of absorption of food substances, though they are in spite of presence of tegument. So tegument helps in the withstand or it controls or it will not allow the animal to killed by the digestive juices or digestive enzymes of the host. Then coming to the next one is muscular pharynx. So what is the specialty of this muscular pharynx? The muscular pharynx enable the parasite to suck fluid from the host body. Now you can see here in this case, now I will show you. So this is planaria or Dugesiia, where the digestive organs, you can see here the muscular pharynx. This is the muscular pharynx. You can see the muscular pharynx are very much helpful. It will come out of the mouth to suck the tissues, also to suck the food material from the host tissues. So this for this purpose the pharynx become more muscular. So this is also the change or the new organ. It is of course it is not a new organ, but it has developed. The existing organ is developed much. So far we have seen the morphological adaptations. Morphological adaptations, as I said earlier, is three types: loss of certain organs, modification of certain organs, and development of new organs. Now coming to the physiological adaptations. Now physiological adaptations are listed in a very big list, but let us have a look at some of the important ones. So first and foremost one is anaerobic respiration. I already told you that the anaerobic respiration, that means the parasites they need to enter inside the body of the host, and that's why mostly in the different tissues they have to live. So according to the different tissues of the host, the medium, then most of the times they have to lead in less oxygen levels, less oxygen tension. So that's why to enable the parasite to survive in oxygen deficient surroundings like intestinal lumen, the anaerobic respiration, they have developed this type of respiration, anaerobic respiration. So without oxygen or with less amount of oxygen, and especially many endoparasitic, like for example flatworms like liver fluke, intestinal flukes, and tapeworms live in medium that contain little or no oxygen at all. So they manage to live in such medium by respiring in an anaerobic manner. Without this ability, it would be somewhat difficult for them to survive. Then second one is secretion of anti-enzymes. So what is the secretion of anti-enzymes and even sometimes mucus also? So the intestinal flatworms, they seem to secrete anti-enzymes which neutralize the digestive enzymes of the host. So generally tapeworms stimulate the host intestine to produce a large quantity of mucus, then that surrounds the parasite to further reduce the action of host enzymes. So actually they are very clever in this case. So Lyme cells in the body wall of the tapeworms neutralize the acids formed in the host's gut. So these are the very good adaptations that generally the intestinal parasites they get this paraphysiological adaptation. Now coming to the osmotic adaptability. What is osmotic adaptability? Actually, some of the helminth parasites they seem to possess a considerable osmotic adaptability, as they can successfully live in different media. Like for example, Ascaris lumbricoides, it has to pass through the blood, lungs, trachea and other tissues, and finally it reaches the its final habitat, the intestine. So it has to pass through many organs to reach the intestine. As and when it enters, the Ascaris enters Ascaris enters into the body, it has to pass through the many tissues to reach its final habitat, the intestine. So when it passes through the many tissues, the tissues might have the different organs might have show some different osmotic environment. So to live in that, to adapt to the different osmotic environment, the parasite also got the adapted to successfully live in different media. Now coming to the chemotaxis. This chemotaxis is generally it's a parasite that enables them to find their way to their final habitat in the host body. How the chemotaxis means? It is a sensor, a sensation to know that where is its final habitat. Okay. For example, the Ascaris when it reaches the intestine, then it stops there. Further, it do not move. But for example, if it enters into the blood and lungs and trachea, so it is they are not its final organs, final habitats. So that's why by sensing the outer environment or chemical environment inside the different organs, it will know that it is not their final habitat. So until and unless it reaches its final habitat, then it will go on moving. Then high reproductive capacity. Generally, all parasites have high reproductive capacity by producing large number of eggs, so that the wastage they can compensate the wastage that occurs during transfer from one host to the other. For example, especially to the one host to the other, if it is digenetic parasite or if it is monogenetic parasite, from one person to the other person, from one host to the other host directly, also they produce more number of eggs. At least some of the eggs are dead, at least some of the eggs will be available to sustain their race. Now simple life history. Some some especially this is this some simple life history is present in some monogenetic parasites, which can complete the life cycle which can complete their life cycle in the single host, and they have increased the chances of survival of eggs or juveniles in reaching the host. Whereas in some other in some other parasites, the life history is very complex. Like for example, the parasitic flatworms generally have complex life cycle due to the formation of several larval forms that inhabit one or more intermediate hosts, and this brings about dispersal also. So whether they simple life history or complex life history, they accommodate themselves to their according to their life cycle. So here what happens, this when the complex life cycle is there, which brings about dispersal and reduces the period of exposure to the hazards of external environment. So this in this case it complex life cycle, though it is complex life cycle, it changes itself according to its mode of life. Thank you.